helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. This is a special political edition. Are things getting tense at work due to politics? Certainly a divisive time in American history. So I'm happy to be joined with leadership expert Anton Gunn about how we can handle this, and also a new report that's showing half of American workers actually say they've been treated badly or have seen others treated poorly due to their political views. Anton, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So workplace tensions due to elections, 64% of Americans say they actually have been treated poorly in the workplace due to politics. This would be on both sides?
Yes, so the bottom line is this, is that people experience unfairness for all kinds of reasons. And sometimes we know that outside issues like politics, the elections, they in fact impact our daily lives. And so we bring that to the workplace. And depending on where you are, what part of the country, what type of business you're in, people could sway one way or the other. And some people will not like you because of who you support or what you agree or disagree with. And so it does have a negative impact. In our research report, the State of Workplace Injustice, we found that 66% of people experience injustice in the last year. And some people experience this every single month, like 23%. But the challenge is that when people experience it, they sometimes take it to their higher ups. But we found that only 17% of employers actually did anything about it when people experience it in the workplace. And so this is a big challenge, that if your employer is creating an environment where they're not doing anything about it, and you feel like you're being picked on or bullied because of your views or your beliefs, it is a serious challenge, and you got to know how to respond to it.
Yeah, so my goal is for everyone listening to this, either on YouTube or the podcast, streaming on our streaming channel, or watching the show on the Wax, lots of different ways to watch CURES. I want people to come away equipped with some ideas of how they can feel more empowered at work. So basically the reverse of that being 83% of employers not taking action. Do you think that's because they're not thinking of it as real injustice, like it's different than another form of harassment?
Yes, absolutely. That's the whole point, is that they're not taking it seriously. They're not even investigating to know whether it's serious or not. And we know that these types of things actually has an impact on your performance. Sometimes it makes you want to quit your job or just totally disengage. And we've also found that people will commit what we call counterproductive workplace behaviors, that if an employer doesn't respond to it, people will start to act out at work. They might sabotage the team that they're on, or maybe they just don't show up to meetings, or they don't do their part. These counterproductive behaviors have a negative impact not only on the work itself, but the other people in the organization. So it's really important for you to know what to do, and for your employer to know what to do, to make sure that they keep a healthy, high culture workplace environment where everybody feels that they're valued and respected, and that they have the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm realizing it could be a little bit different for journalists because we're governed by ethics, that we get reminders of do not post your own political views on any social media, best not to discuss any at the office. We're supposed to keep that out of here, because as independent journalists, it's sort of just always been guided that in newsrooms, don't be injecting your own opinions as much as possible. Yeah. But are you saying if you work in a regular place and you're at the water cooler and someone's talking about, say, former President Trump's speech last night at the Republican National Convention, what should you be doing? Should you try not to mention anything, or how does this injustice start to happen?
Yeah, so I would say the fundamental thing is this: you are a human being. You experience things in life, and it's okay to talk about what you see, what you heard, what you learned. And in some industries, it could be a big impact. So for instance, if you work in a defense industry where you want a certain president because they're going to make sure we have a strong, robust defense, then of course, politics may come into your workplace. Or if you work in construction and there's an infrastructure law and you want those things to continue to happen, you're going to talk about it at work. And it's okay to talk about things that are important to you. But what's not okay is to get into an argument about the things that are important to you that may be different for someone else. So the main point is that it's okay to make a statement. It's okay to have a small conversation. But if you feel that conversation getting heated, the first thing you want to do is you want to take a breath. You want to take a breath and slow down. But if you feel like people are attacking you and beating you up because you shared a particular position, then what I want you to do is to document what happens. Who was there? Who was involved? How did it make you feel? Because that documentation is going to be really important to know fact or fiction versus your feelings about it. And you want to know what's real and what's not real. The second thing that I tell people to do is to think about it in this way. Is this an isolated incident where it only happened one time? You maybe had one discussion, it got a little heated, and it's over, and everybody goes back to work. But if you feel like someone every day has something to say to you because of your beliefs or because of what you have shared and expressed, that can be workplace injustice, that can be bullying, that can be harassment, and these things are out of bounds. And so you should also know that your employer has policies, procedures, and rules of the road, things that everybody should be doing at work and shouldn't be doing at work. And as a journalist, yours are probably more strict than everybody else's. But most places, they just say, don't get into arguments at work and don't attack people verbally at work. But it might be okay to discuss political issues. So you just got to know the rules of the road.
Yeah, so one of the things you want us to do is assess the situation. Taking that breath, of course, is important because we can feel really hurt or upset, or if it's your boss perhaps saying negative things, you might even feel fearful about your employment. So the first step is, do you want to handle this one-on-one, but you don't think we should go to HR unless it's a more repeated offense?
Yeah, if it's a more repeated offense, or if it's a supervisor who continually puts you in a difficult position because of what you believe, then that's when you want to think about having that documentation and taking it to a trusted leadership position or someone in HR to have that conversation. But there's no need to run to HR for everything. We're all adults. You should be able to manage through those situations. That's what good emotional intelligence is to be able to know fact from fiction, be able to control your own emotions, not escalate things and not antagonize things. But again, if this is a repeated offense, something that's going over and over and over again, and it's happening for a long period of time, you have to get other people involved. And you have to be clear about what you want to be done about it. Do you just want it to stop? Because that should be the bottom line, is you want it to stop and be able to do your job. But you can't go in and say, listen, I want this person fired because they've said X, Y, and Z. That's where you got to have the documentation, because that is how people are going to be able to investigate whether this was an isolated incident. Is this happening over and over again? Who else was involved? Were there witnesses there? Did anybody else see this? Because if nobody saw it and it's just you versus another person, then without any real facts or figures, the employer is not likely to be able to do anything without any evidence.
Okay, so documentation just means like in your own little journal or something. You don't have to use it right away. You just want to write it down.
You just won't.
Okay.
Yes, one of the things I did back in when I was in a corporate world, I would always keep a journal around what happened every day, the people I had meetings with, and if something got said, well, who else was in the room when Bob said this crazy thing, or when Bob said this thing that hurt somebody else's feelings? Who else was there? Because you want to be able to share that at the appropriate time. It says, well, here's my notes in my journal. You can keep them in your phone. You can keep them on a notepad. You can scribble it down on the agenda for the meeting if you were in a meeting. You can just keep the paper anywhere and just hold on to it to be able to reflect back on their circumstance to make sure you know who was who and what was what.
Yeah. So part of this is we talk a lot about relationships on this show and how to handle our emotions. And that's, we've learned about the I statements, right? Using the I feel. That's what you want us to remember when we're dealing with this political tension at the work, using statements like I feel disrespected when, or not forcing our beliefs on others.
Absolutely. Don't use the you statements. Don't say you did this or you did that. Say I felt, or I feel, or in my experience, this is what happened. So the context is always to focus internally on yourself. Be very thoughtful about it, because the moment you start accusing people, it gets people's defenses up even higher. So it's okay to talk about what you feel and what this experience has meant to you, but don't use the you statements.
And I think where people get frustrated with the I statements is, I've been saying I feel, and yet you keep doing the same thing. And that's when, if you're not getting the change, that's when you do think it's appropriate to report it to HR or your supervisor, unless it's your supervisor doing the inappropriate things.
Correct. You want to make sure that you use those I statements in a one-on-one context. Have it one-on-one with that person. Direct communication is always the easiest and the simplest. But if you don't get any resolution there, then that's when you want to think about who in leadership can I talk to about this? Does your organization have an ombudsman office where you can go and have that? Employee relations is a great place to go in HR to do that. Maybe a senior supervisor above your supervisor that you feel like you can't talk to. So make sure that you document, again, bring the documentation with you and talk about what you want the desired outcome to be, which is, I just want to be respected and left alone to do my job. Or, I want the antagonism to stop. It's okay to say what you want because that gives them direction to investigate and then what might be a resolution that will put you in a position that you feel comfortable and safe to continue to do your work in an inclusive way.
So I think sometimes in situations, right, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure, they say, right? So if you've got,
Yes.
if you have a situation at work, what are some do's and don'ts? I mean, we've never been more divided as a nation, and it's tense right now. What would you advise people to do so they don't find themselves embroiled in these political arguments in the workplace?
Yeah, so the number one thing I will say is to recognize that we all have freedom of speech, but we don't all have the same freedom of speech at the place in which we work. Every employer has policies around what you can and can't do. So a smart thing to do in the first place is to know what are the policies in your organization. Some organizations are okay with you talking about not only politics, but social issues, your faith, your background, all of these things, and that's okay. But other places, they might have a framework where that's not important. So do know what your policies are. That's the first thing. The second thing is to know that just because it is a political season doesn't mean you need to have a political conversation at work. Is it related or relative to what you do? Or is it just something that you want to talk about because it was so big on the news last night that I can't help it? I want to talk about it all morning. Know that that can be a distraction for you being productive and for your team and your organization to be productive. So know that you don't have to talk about politics all the time. The third thing that I would tell you from a do or don't standpoint is do be cautious of other people's emotions and feelings. You know that in these heightened political times, the things that can set you off, there might be something else to set other people off. So if you're conscious and thoughtful about the feelings and the emotions of the other people in your organization, know what you can and can't say. And my final point on this is that remember, you are there to do a job. You're there to achieve a goal as a company. You're on a team. You should be working together as a team. Everybody wants success. And so if you all want success, ask the question, is this leading us towards our success or is this taking us away from our success? And sometimes talking politics and raising that tension in the workplace could be taking you away from the thing that you all showed up every day to do. These are people you didn't marry, that you're not in love with, that you show up to work every day to do a job together. So it's best to create the kind of environment where everybody feels safe, valued, respected, and included, and visible in the workplace to do what you all came there to do.
Give us a little perspective. I know you had a role in the Obama administration. You've been a witness to politics and the academics around politics for a long time.
Yes.
I don't think this was such an issue, right, when I was growing up or for our parents. We have a different juncture in history with the divisiveness. So is it just different, and how we have to handle ourselves is different for this generation right now in this point in history?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll give you a little context for this. So outsized political issues and social issues have always entered the workplace. Like my parents and grandparents could tell you today where they were when JFK was assassinated. They remember that. We all remember 9/11 where we were. And we all remember when the war on terror started. We all remember these big outside events and we talk about them at work. But the difference today is we didn't have a social media enterprise, whether it be TikTok, Facebook, or Twitter, or any platform that you choose to be on, where these conversations are incessantly going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all hours of the night, entering our minds every single day. And we have generations of people who are coming into the workforce who have built their lives around these applications. I mean, think about it. If you're 25 working today, TikTok has always been a part of your life. And so that may be how you show up at work. And these things are what make the tensions in the workplace higher because there's no time or place to turn it off. Where in the past, we've had times and places to turn it off, but we don't now. So it requires us to be a little bit more prudent, a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more wise around how we engage in the conversation and who we engage in the conversation with. And then the last thing, our workplaces have become much more open and inclusive to the place that we all now feel like we can show up with our identities, and it's rightly so, we should be able to show up. And a part of my identity might be the issues that I talk about every day. So these are the things that make it more complicated. It's not about the candidates, it's not about the election itself in general, but it's around how we have a long-term, nonstop conversation about these things in every aspect of our lives. So whether it's in the Uber ride to work or to the commute to work or the radio or the television or our social media apps, we haven't turned it off. And so there's no reason to expect that we will turn it off when we show up at work.
Right, except unless your company has policies on that. But speaking of social media, I mentioned that here we do have policies that if you work for this station, you cannot post any political views on our social media because that would be an extension of ourselves. In order to remain independent and unbiased. So if you're in an industry where they don't have rules like that, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, Liz, would you advise it's still not a good idea to be posting about politics, given that you might have friends at work who see your pages, or is that a no-no?
Yes. Yeah, so I would 100% it's a no-no. So think about it like this, we work with people, but many times they're not our friends. They're not people that we socialize with all day, every day outside of work. However, we might go to a workplace and then we friend them on Facebook or we follow them on Instagram. And so we technically become social friends, even though we're not friends in real life. And because of that, they can see every post, every comment, and everything that you make. So when you put it out there, don't ever assume that just because you put it out there and then you don't like it, you try to delete it, that it's gone. I'm telling you, it's already been screen shared, it's already been screenshotted, and it will show back up in the workplace. And every employer has some clauses around, does this reflect the character and the values of us as an organization? So even if they don't have explicit policies around what you can do, most companies have value statements. Does this uphold to our values? And we measure people by the values. We hire and fire and all those reasons around, we want people who uphold our values. And sometimes your political speech or what you post on social media literally could be antithetical to the values of your organization. So if I'm a physician and I see patients of all races and ethnicities, and I decide to post something on social media that says, I don't like groups of people who look like this, then what is that going to say to your patients? And then what is that going to say about your hospital system or your physician practice? Do you not want patients that look like that to come into the practice? And so those things can spill over. And that's why you got to be very careful about what you post. I'm not saying to never post, but I know a lot of smart people who have spent a lot of time studying these issues will tell you, don't put anything on social media that you don't want to be shared and put back in your face the next day, even after you delete it. So you just got to be cautious.
Yeah. Well, I have teenagers, and that's sort of what I tell them. Do not put anything on your social media accounts. I hope they listen, that you don't want me to see or to be on the cover, the front page of the New York Times, or you don't want your principal to read. Like, assume anyone. If we're putting anything on social media, we better be super comfortable that our clients, our kids, our bosses, anyone's going to see it, and they better be okay with it.
Yeah, no doubt. And, the other challenge with this is that, again, I have a 19-year-old, and this world of social media virality, like everybody wants to go viral and they don't care whether they go viral for something positive or something negative. And we all have seen the videos recently or at any point in time where people say something embarrassing or they do something embarrassing and people find it funny or hilarious and it becomes something that goes viral. And literally people have made their economic careers because they made a crazy video and it was either explicit in verbal kinds of ways or no clothing on and something. They went viral and they made money on it. And so people literally think, okay, I don't care if it's bad. I don't care if it's good. I'd be happy to go viral talking about this thing or sharing that thing. And that's the difficulty that we're in. We're in a generation where it's all about the likes and the clicks and the views. And it doesn't really matter what you say good or what you say bad. So we all need to be very cautious about thinking about how we play in that space.
So let me ask you also about the rules of just knowing someone's political affiliation. Let's say you've got a
Yeah.
small business owner who is openly supporting Trump and they're hiring.
Yeah.
Are they allowed to
Yeah.
ask you who you support or even make that a condition of employment? Is that protected, like our gender or our
Yeah.
sexuality?
Yeah, those are bad questions to ask as an employer, and it could get you in trouble because usually if you're asking that one question, you're probably going to ask 4 or 5 more that we know are violations of federal law. And you don't want to get yourself as an employer in bad shape by doing that. And as someone on the other side being asked that question in an interview, you need to question, is that a place I want to work? Now, the only places I can say that it's probably safe to assume that people on your side is if you're working for a campaign. So if you're working for a political campaign in a party, then the assumption would be that you believe in that candidate, you share those values, and so that might be okay. But again, employers asking those questions about your political beliefs, that's a no-no, that's a bad form, and it's going to lead to a slippery slope that could get you in trouble. That if someone doesn't get an opportunity, they could claim that they were discriminated against not only because of their political beliefs, but because of their faith or their religion, or because of what they think about and who they are as an individual. So you don't want to go down that pathway.
Any predictions for us as we actually approach Election Day? What's going to happen? Not who's going to win,
Yeah.
but what
Yeah.
it's going to be
Yeah.
like
So I
at
will
work and
say
how we can be
the
proactive.
biggest prediction I will give you is this. Um, we're going to have a lot more turmoil as we approach this election for a wide variety of reasons, and it could spill over in the workplace. And you don't want to be creating an injustice framework for the people that you work with. You don't want to be creating challenges. Like I said, we found that the impact of this injustice in the workplace is an economic impact. People will quit a job, or they will disengage at work, or they will start to act up at work. And so what we don't want is to kind of create that environment. And so it's up to all of us to tone it down. But I will suspect that it's going to heat up no matter what goes on. And if we have any more transitions, again, if President Biden decides not to run, that's going to be tumultuous for all of the people who work in and around government. That's going to be a disruption that we've never seen in history. And because of those kind of disruptions, it's going to make it hard for people to stay focused on the main thing. And that is, how do we take care of each other? How do we do our jobs? How do we keep our wits about us? So again, a lot of breathing, a lot of self-reflection, focusing on your emotional intelligence is what good leaders teach their teams and organizations to do.
So in our final 5 minutes together, I love to give people, just let's go back to some action steps. Number one, if you're experiencing injustice at work, you're not alone. 64% of people say they have. About 83% of employers aren't doing anything about it. So this is, your report found, this is a pretty common issue that so many are facing. But number one, just start taking some notes and keep a record of what's happening. That would be your first piece of advice.
Yeah, first thing is just to document every time it happened. Again, if it only happened one time, it might be an isolated incident and you'll never hear about it again. But if this is happening every day, you want to document. That's the first thing you want to do. The second thing you want to do is you want to assess, is this a situation where you can handle it one-on-one yourself by having a direct conversation? And if you want to, rehearse that conversation with a colleague that you trust, that, hey, I really want to address the bad behavior and the commentary that I continue to get from my colleague. Can you help me to think through what I should say to him to de-escalate the situation? That's where you practice your I statements. I feel like this, or I'm experiencing this, or I feel like you're not supporting me because of what I said last week about X, Y, and Z. And then that's what you want to do, is you want to rehearse, you want to practice your I statements. And then if you don't get any resolution to it, use your documentation and take that information to a supervisor. Take it to someone who is a trusted leader in the organization. So a supervisor or HR, and make sure you say to them what you want the resolution to be. Don't just come and complain about a problem without bringing a solution. So the solution might be, I just want him to stop antagonizing me for my political beliefs. I just want to stop having the conversation over and over again about this same subject. Can we just stay focused on the work? So those are the tangible things that people should do every single day. and this is the last caveat I will give everybody. If you seek help through all of these channels, you try to be self-reflective, you document, you report it to HR, and nothing gets done about it, then you might need to question whether the leadership in your organization is committed to building a world-class workplace culture where you can thrive, and maybe you need to start looking for another opportunity. And I wouldn't be afraid to tell people sometimes some places are not for you, particularly if they're not going to respond to the injustices that you're experiencing at work.
Yeah, that was one of the things you said. If you do have to bring it to HR, and hopefully you can de-escalate it with some of the tips you just gave us, but if you do have to bring it to HR, if they are dismissive or passive or like, okay, thanks, and they don't offer anything, it could indicate a broader problem with the company. On the flip side, how do you know if it's being handled properly? What would look like something like, this is good, this is a good response?
Yeah, so a good response from an employer, and this is what I teach most of the clients that I work with, a good response is first to acknowledge to the person who reported it that we heard you, we're taking it seriously, and we're going to investigate. So an investigation requires interviews. So if you report something to someone and you never hear back from anybody, then I would assume they're not investigating. But if they have interviewed you, talked to you about it, they've talked to the other people that you named that were in the room, and you heard from them that, hey, they came and talked to me about what happened the other day, then know that something is moving afoot around trying to address the issue. But the main point to know whether something was done about it is if it stops or if it continues. If it continues, then you know the employer probably didn't do anything about it. If it stops, then you know that they did address it. Now, sometimes you may not hear all of the nitty-gritty details of how someone might be punished, because sometimes they don't have to be transparent around what's been done. What has to be transparent is that it stopped. And if it doesn't stop, then it didn't get done.
Anton Gunn, and you've got your, tell people where they could maybe read this whole report if they want. I know some of the highlights, we've talked about what you found, but if people really want to dig in and see how injustice is playing a part in the workplace, especially now, how do we read the whole report?
Yeah, if you would like a copy of the whole report, you can go to workplaceinjusticereport.com. Give me a little bit of information. You can download the report immediately and read through some of these startling statistics that we found, particularly the economic impact of injustice in the workplace. Almost $1 trillion a year is lost by employers because people experience injustice, the employer does nothing about it, and people quit, they disengage, or they commit these counterproductive workplace behaviors. So go to workplaceinjusticereport.com and get a copy of the report, and I'd love to get your feedback on it.
Anton Gunn, thank you so much. That is our time here on CURES. We thank everyone for watching and hope you all have a great day and be well.